Hello everybody, welcome to the Evolutionary Podcast, and this is Katie Galante speaking. The last little 30-minute podcast episode that I did was about the Aries stellium and about Uranus and Taurus going into Uranus in Gemini, but we kind of focused a little bit more on Uranus in Taurus and a retrospective of what that actually looked like for a lot of people, including me. And we talked a little bit less about Uranus in Gemini. So I thought to leave a little note about that. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about Uranus. Uranus is a planet that rules or is associated to sudden change. Change that you hadn't quite planned for. Change that was not really what you had in mind. It's associated with a lot of other things, but let's start with that one. It's a disruptor. It disrupts the routine. It disrupts the rut. If it is moving through your chart in a way that is harmonious, very often that disruption is experienced as excitement. So if you were to have Uranus trine the Sun, for example, a lot of new stuff is going to come into your life that feels good, new, exciting, and yay. Let's go with that. But if Uranus is coming into your chart with a square aspect or even a conjunction, that disruption is usually coming in a challenging way that is going to create upheaval and an experience that is a little bit like the tower in the tarot. So something that comes out of the blue, pulls the rug from underneath you, and then you have to scramble to go into whatever the new thing is that presents itself. In the long run, Uranian disruptions are actually positive because that rut was probably a rut that one needed to be without, and the new that is coming in is probably better than what was left behind. But, human beings are creatures of habit. So, for example, last year I had Uranus squaring my Venus, and literally to the day, I had to move very suddenly. My Venus is in the 4th house, which is in the house of home. So there was a sudden reason out of the blue that caused me to have to move very quickly. And when Uranus went retrograde and then it went back over that Venus again, the exact same thing happened. I was in Canada and realized that I could not renew my visa, which I thought I could. And so very quickly I had to make other plans. So it was basically a very disruptive, fast energy, because Uranus is a very fast energy usually. It's associated with lightning that kind of disrupted the home, the home situation that I was in, so that I had to move very quickly. Now, that's just an example. It can be a relationship that suddenly ends. It can be a friendship that suddenly ends. Or a job, where somebody may be working at a certain job and then all of a sudden Uranus comes and that job overnight is not there anymore. And this is the case for Uranus across the board. It doesn't matter what sign it's in, it's one of the characteristics that it does have. As a result of that, Uranus is also associated with innovation because it's disrupting things and then you have to find a new way of doing something. So Uranus is also associated with innovation, with technology, with new stuff. And it's also associated with genius and doing things differently. In some ways, it's a higher octave of Mercury. It's like doing things through thinking that is different from the thinking that one had before. As I said before, Uranus is also associated with lightning, electricity, technology in general. So innovation usually translates into technology. So Uranus is also very often associated with the future because although when it comes in, it ends something often, or it will pull you out of a rut, it's pulling you out of the rut to pull you into the future. So it's a future forward planet. It pulls you into the next stage. It pulls you into the next step of evolution, right? And this is different, for example, from Pluto, that can also be a disruptor, but Pluto is pulling you down into your depth, where you have to face your shadow, or you have to find your own power, or whatever. But it's the Pluto energy is an energy that pulls you into your depth, where you have to find resources to overcome something, okay? Well, instead, Uranus is more like, I'm pulling this from you because I'm pushing you into the next step, which is in the future, forward. Something new, something that needs to be born, and for it to be born, this other stuff has got to go, right? And as I said, when the Uranian energy is working in a harmonious way, that can feel like excitement, like new opportunities, new things, new ideas that come in. And then one is propelled into a new chapter. So that, for example, can be meeting somebody that all of a sudden opens a door that was closed before, and you have many new opportunities, new friends, or a new chapter of life that starts to happen. Well, instead, when it's challenging, the old life is literally ripped from you, and you have no choice, and you have to move forward into the next chapter. So I hope that gives an idea a little bit of the Uranian energy and what it does. So it disrupts the rut. It makes you leave one chapter behind and move into another, easily or not. It's future forward. It's about innovation, new stuff, technology, higher levels of thinking, higher mind, higher octave of Mercury, okay? Fast energy, zip, 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 okay? It's also, it beats at the beat of its own, what is that saying? Walking at the beat of one's own drum. So you basically, wherever you have Uranus in your chart, that is your own unique brand of genius, your own unique brand of thinking. In some ways, Uranus then ruling Aquarius, it's ruling an air sign. Uranus does have an air quality to it overall. Now, Uranus has been in Taurus. We've talked about that in the last episode, where it's been disrupting everything that has to do with Taurus, which is the material world, our sense of safety and security, our foundations, food, nature, money, grounding, sense of stability, all of those things. And even the earth itself, with earthquakes and earth changes. Lots of earth changes during the past 7 years. So now Uranus is going into Gemini. Gemini is also a fast mercurial sign. It's all about ideas, communication. And if you talk to a Gemini, they talk very fast often. It's about the agile mind that is zipping from here to there, thinking about things. And unless there's a Saturn aspect or a Pluto aspect, sometimes the thinking of Mercury can be a bit superficial, right? But if you have some other deepening or structuring planets working with them in a harmonious way, then you will also have the depth, and you will also have the structure in the thinking. But by itself, Gemini can be a little bit flighty. It can be interested in everything, but deepening not much. But it's a very mentally agile sign. It's all about learning, communication, interesting things, being interested in this, being interested in that. So when Uranus enters Gemini, you can expect fast mind. You can also expect a little bit of scattered mind, a little bit of overload of mind, and a little bit of overload of the nervous system. Uranus in Gemini is also going to bring innovation and originality into the realm of ideas and all things air. So Uranus in Gemini, for this reason, is often associated with the discovery of new things, inventions, new technologies, but also new ways of thinking. Now, I can't remember if this is the case. Again, sometimes I start talking, but I don't do enough research to be super sure about what I'm saying. But at some point during the Age of Enlightenment, Uranus was in Gemini. So it's associated with not just inventions and discoveries, but also changes in thought systems themselves. Now, there's always going to be technological innovation under Uranus transits. So, for example, in Taurus, the technology was very much in the field of Taurian things. So it was associated with money and finances, where we had cryptocurrencies and blockchain type stuff. Everything becoming digital payments, ways of doing payments online. It's not that those things didn't exist before, but they become more mainstream. I think Zelle started to be a thing during Uranus in Taurus. All of those kind of things, right? But there was also new things in another Taurian field, that is the field of the body. So focus on plastic surgeries. Again, it's not that there wasn't plastic surgery before, but now everybody was getting plastic surgery. And gender reassignment surgeries, hormonal therapies, like a lot of innovations and inventions in the field of the body. Also innovations and inventions in the fields of food and agriculture. So we had, and by the way, all these things are not necessarily good. Like we had lab-grown meat, a bigger emphasis on genetically engineered or bioengineered foods, etc. Okay? So when we go into the Gemini zone, the innovations are going to be, and the inventions of the technology is going to be in the field of the mind. So one of the things that will probably happen during this time, and I mentioned it in the last podcast little episode also, is that we're probably going to see the development of brain chips and brain interface technologies. And some of those things are already kind of out there, but they may become more mainstream or applicable to daily life. Also, technologies that have to do with writing, so probably apps that have to do with communication, writing, that will be mediated through technology that is even more advanced than what we have right now, because we already have some of those technologies, but we may see more of it, okay, or different ones, or things that we haven't yet thought about, such as instead of talking to each other over WhatsApp, there may be some kind of holographic way of doing it, okay, and there will also be innovation in the field of ideas with the new belief systems, new discoveries, new information that will push people into thinking differently. Now, the interesting thing here is that this Uranus in Gemini is not just coming in by himself. It's coming in with a couple of things going on with it. So first of all, it's going to enter very quickly into a trine with Pluto in Aquarius. So, and it's going to be traveling with Pluto in Aquarius for the whole time that Uranus is going to be in Gemini. So when I was talking before about the fact that Gemini can be a bit superficial unless it has some other planet that is aspecting it or aspecting its ruler that pulls it into more depth or more structure. Well, in this case, we do have Pluto that is in a trine with it, which is a positive flowing aspect for pretty much the whole time that Uranus is going to be in Gemini. So that deepening aspect is there. And there's also potential for either Uranus influencing the Pluto in Aquarius energy or the Pluto in Aquarius energy influencing the Uranus in Gemini energy, or both. So these two planets are going to be influencing each other. And I talked in the other episode about this fact that this Uranus-Pluto, it's a cycle. And they were conjunct in the 60s. They were in a square aspect in 2013, 2014. And now they're going to be in a trine aspect, which is a flowing aspect, but it means that this Uranus in Gemini cannot be divorced from the energy of Pluto in Aquarius, because the two are going to be traveling pretty much together. And the Pluto in Aquarius is all about where is the power, and sometimes where is the abuse of power. The power, when Pluto is in Aquarius, tends to go to the people, but Aquarius is also ruled by Uranus that is all about technology. So there's going to be conversations for sure about the rise of big tech and the power of big tech. And I won't go too deep into this because I already talked about it the last time. Now, there's another thing that is happening with Uranus as it enters into Gemini. It's going to be, at least very briefly, in a conjunction with Sedna. And Sedna, at the moment, I think is at 1 degree of Gemini. So this is not going to last a very long time, but as Uranus enters into Gemini, it's literally bumping into Sedna immediately, okay? And Sedna is one of the dwarf planets. It's way out there in the Oort cloud, which is way beyond Pluto, okay? If Pluto has an orbit around the 250 mark, Sedna has an orbit of, I will have to check this, but it's in the thousands. It's 15,000 or something. I have to go check. All right, so I checked, and the exact orbit for Sedna in terms of years is 11,400. I often get Sedna confused with the next planet in the Oort cloud that I think has a 32,000 year orbit, but Sedna has 11,400 years of orbit, okay? And so in the actual ingress chart of Uranus going into Gemini, Uranus is conjunct Sedna, and it will be conjunct Sedna for the first few months, and after which it will separate, and I don't think it actually goes all the way back to the Sedna degrees. I'll have to check. Anyway, where is this significant? Sedna and Uranus conjunction. Now, Sedna is a dwarf planet. There's a lot to say about it. I can talk about that separately one day. But Sedna is associated with an Inuit legend of a girl whose father wanted her to marry, and she was part of an Inuit tribe. She didn't want to marry, and she kept refusing all her suitors. She had a strong independent spirit, okay? But then at some point she kind of gives in and picks one particular suitor that promises her all sorts of things. He was a bit of a future faker, coming in saying about all sorts of things he was going to do for her, which then he did none of those things. So off she went with her new husband, and the new husband wasn't even who he said he was, because he was actually a crow spirit in human form. And basically, Sedna was very unhappy with this dude and called her father because she wanted to leave. So the father comes to pick her up with his canoe. And I'm sure it has a different name. That it's not called a canoe. But anyway, that thing. And So off they go onto the water, but then the crow spirit follows them both and whips up a huge storm, maybe through some even magical means. Big storm forms on the ocean that they are, I think it's that they're kayaking on, okay. And the father, who wants to save his own life, decides to throw Sedna overboard so that he can save himself and not capsize with his kayak. And Sedna doesn't want to die, so she clings onto the side of the canoe, and her father chops off her fingers so that she lets go of the canoe, and Sedna and her fingers sink to the bottom of the ocean, where the fingers get transformed into the mammals and the animals of the sea, and Sedna is transformed into the goddess of the deep, but in particular the goddess that provides the Inuit with food and marine life, but marine life that they use for food and for sustenance. And then she's revered by the Inuit, and the Inuit invoke her and pray to her when they want abundance and they want to fish and they want to capture a lot of sea life, okay? So, in general, Sedna, in my view, is associated with PTSD and fragmentation. There are many other aspects to Sedna. This is not the only one, but it's the one that is coming up in my intuition at the moment. When I was looking at that, I was like, this is going to be interesting. Because Uranus in Gemini is bumping into, right away, an energy that has to do with being forsaken, being betrayed, and also being cut into little pieces and thrown into the bottom of the sea by somebody that's supposed to love you. So there's a betrayal theme, and there's a PTSD theme, but there's also a redemption from abuse theme. And so Uranus in Gemini is moving into aspect right away with this. And Uranus in Gemini is about information, and it's about new ways of thinking, new ideas, and so on. But it's also about information that may even be different from the norm, or stuff that we haven't really heard before, or kind of like a new novelty information that we haven't really heard before. So especially during the month of May, this aspect is going to be tight. And we may, because we've already seen with the themes that are coming from the Neptune-Saturn conjunction in Aries, that there's a lot of exposure of information that is being made known and exposed. We may bump into more information of that kind, but this one may be even more shocking, because Uranus also rules shock, and it may be slightly traumatizing as well. And if Uranus does retrograde back onto that degree again, which I have to check, it may do so at the beginning of 2027 if it does, we may see that repeat again when that aspect comes into orb again. Some of that stuff is already happening. It's only been a few days since Uranus has gone into Gemini, and some of that stuff is already happening. There's a lot of almost like horror sci-fi information that is coming out at the moment about, very hidden things, hidden technologies, and hidden stuff that has to do with things that we would usually associate with science fiction, okay? We'll see more of that. That's my sense, okay? Also, disclosure. Big talks at the moment about disclosure, all stuff to do with UFOs and life other than human life, and some of that may come into play as well. Yeah, so I think that is all that I have to say at the moment about Uranus in in conjunction with Sedna, it's not going to stay there long enough for it to have massive consequences, but it is in the Ingress chart. So some of this slightly shocking, slightly traumatizing flavor that comes with the Uranus in Gemini may continue to be there for the 7 years just because it's in aspect in the Ingress chart, like an undertone. And also, as I say, the Uranus in Gemini is in a ongoing trine aspect with Pluto, and even if it's not in trine by degrees, it is in trine by sign. So there's going to be a Plutonian undertone to Uranus in Gemini throughout the 7 years of Uranus in Gemini. So we can expect changes and information in the realm of ideas of the mind and information that is deeply transformative. A little bit shocking and deeply transformative. We're also going to see technologies that may have a similar flavor, that have maybe some slightly shocking element, but deeply transformative. And we are also definitely going to see abuses of power or technology used in favor of dark power, at least initially, again, because of the Pluto in Aquarius being in aspect with Uranus in Gemini. It's in a trine aspect, which means that it flows, but the fact that it flows doesn't mean that it's good. So, sometimes you can have technology that flows, like the AI, it really flows, but what does it flow into? Is it flowing into a container that is good for us or not? Is it being, the technology is flowing, but is it a good technology? So just because there's a trine, it doesn't mean that what's emerging from it is good. It just means that it's emerging with ease, but that does not necessarily mean that what is emerging from it is good. So I think that in general, because of both Uranus in Gemini and Pluto in Aquarius, we are going to have a lot of discussions about technology and about what role the technology is going to have in our society and to what degree we allow for it to shape our society. Personally, I think that we have to have technology that is in service to humanity rather than technology that overpowers humanity in some ways. So we're going to have to learn how to navigate a very accelerating technological world. And we're also going to have to learn to discern the motivations of the people and corporations that are pushing said technology and what they want to do with it. Okay, technology, as usual, is neutral, but it's what people want to do with it that matters, right? So, for example, atomic energy, you can do some good stuff with it, but if you use it to make weapons, for example, that's not good. Also, some technologies are more dangerous than others because they're harder to control, and I think that nuclear power is one of those, but we are going to find out that AI is one of those as well. Once you let a certain kind of cat out of the bag that has an extremely accelerated self-learning curve, you may reach a point where you can't control it that much, and that discussion needs to be had. All right, so I'm going to stop here because otherwise I'm just going to continue to repeat myself about things that I've already said. There's just one extra thing that I forgot to mention, which is really important. Uranus in Gemini is often associated with civil wars and revolutions. Because Pluto is in Aquarius, we may truly see revolutions during the next 7 years. Our world at the end of this 7 years is not going to be the same as it is now. There's going to be big changes, okay? All right, so that is all for right now, and until the next time.